Alrighty, board gamers. Today we are talking about a little event that was hosted. The annual Ham Board Game League Con Convention 2024, Day 1, aka Board Games at Joe's Place, aka Tabigal Con 2024. And by this, not a real convention. It was just playing some board games a couple of days ago. So, I'm basically just going to use this as an excuse to talk about my thoughts and my reviews on the various board games that we played. Quick preface, though, there were no real board games played. It was nothing but baby goo goo gaga games. Just a quick warning. And also, okay, just like a quick note on the Sublime board game video. That was an inaccurate title, or inappropriate title. I should have called it, "This is Joe's platonic ideal of a board game night," as opposed to a realistic board game night. Because, Sublime kind of implies that it's like, it's good, but it's possible. So I'll get into the details of that towards the end. But I'm going to start off with talking about the games. So first one, Skull. So Skull, pretty good. It's basically poker, but with all the fat trimmed off. It's a bluffing game with the same core goal of you're trying to trick everyone else into bidding as high a number as you possibly can get them to bid. So it's got some upsides compared to poker. For one, you could teach this to kids. People do not need to know poker hands, and people don't need to know how to split the pot or however that works. When that comes up, you could, this game, it works very well. I could imagine this could work for very inebriated, intoxicated people as well. You could just play this on slips of paper or napkins or coasters or whatever. It'd be very, very easy to emulate this game. You also compared to poker, you don't need to know poker has got lots of subtlety and nuance to it, where if you want to be as good as poker as you can be, you're going to want to memorize the whole pre-flop range chart and all of that stuff, where there's really none of that in Skull. I do think it generally succeeds in having that tactile feel. It does just feel good when you're flipping over those discs. They got a proper thud to them. They look very pretty, and they got a decent amount of heftiness to them. And I do think the game generally succeeds in having that same tension of the reveals when someone is at one point and they start flipping over discs, and you're like, oh, please, God, just please please flip my skull over, please. I feel like it does succeed in achieving what it's trying to do in being a very simple bluffing card game. I think, yeah, as a simple bluffing card game, I don't think you could do any better than Skull. It is probably the perfect game in that sort of niche, in that category. That having been said, as a game to just sit down and play with a group of fully functioning, entirely sober adults who are devoting their 100% attention to this game, I do feel sort of leaves something to be desired. There's after the first couple of games, I don't really have any desire to continue playing this. It's not exactly a game that I would want to play 10 times in a row or anything. But ultimately, not to disparage the game, I do think it is good and succeeds in what it's trying to do. Definitely would recommend. Then game number 2 we had played, So Clover. This is just a very simple word game. You're basically just trying to match two different words with one word that you are writing and coming up with. And you're doing that 4 times in a row. It's vaguely along the lines of just one. So Clover, I absolutely love this game. It is my current Spiel des Jahres. Um, I think as like that word game, it gives me like everything I want. For one, there is that sort of social element of you very specifically will like change how you play depending on who is around, like who you are playing with. And I do think it is fun to have those conversations where you talk through with your friends what you think your other friends' process and like their perspective is, and trying to figure out what they are thinking. It just gives you the opportunity to be like very smart when you come up with like an obscure or niche or very specific reference to something, and then someone on the table picks up on it. That just feels good when that happens. But generally, just as a game that promotes conversation or effectively is just entirely like the vast majority of the game is just like talking through different processes and arguments with your friends. I just like that as like the game's core game loop. I just absolutely love this. Unlike Skull, every time I play it, I just want to play more games of it and want to get more opportunities to try to do better. And also, it's just its cooperative nature. It's got like a wholesomeness to it. You know, you're not like there's not like any antagonism, except maybe when you call your friends foolish for how could they possibly think that connecting these words with this idea was a good idea, you know. But generally, everyone having these conversations to work together to figure out their friend's thought process. I can't get enough of it. I absolutely love this game. Big fan. Number one game of the convention. Okay, next game we had Wits. Actually, my last note on So Clover. If I had to have a problem with it, if I had to change something about it, just the like design, the physical experience of the game. I am not a fan of the giant green chunks and hunks of plastic of the game. It looks like a play school little tykes, just Fisher Price kind of game. Like when you break it out, I can't help but feel like the immediate response is, "Uh-oh, this is a toddler game for Candyland babies." Like this, it does not. I like part of me kind of wishes they went more for the sophisticated Scrabble kind of look, the slightly more refined. Because I do feel like if you were to own just a single game as a thing to have on your coffee table when there is a lull in the conversation, to just break out a very quick little word game. I love this game, but it does look like it is for 5-year-olds, which again, not an objective problem with the game at all. Just my very subjective minor little nitpick. But anyway, I do absolutely adore this game. Huge fan. Okay, next game. Wits and Wagers. Actually, last thing on So Clover. I'm excited to play this game to the point where it's been played to death, and then I just get sick of it and I just want to vomit at the thought of even someone's mention of this game, which I definitely think is a frequent thing that has come with any board game that I like, and then force my friends to play a bunch of times. Is just getting sick of it. Anyway, okay, so Wits and Wagers. It's Vegas, baby. So, what was that? Okay, yeah, good party game. But I will say, so the general problem that I have with this game is as a real board game, where just with any game where you're doubling and tripling, quadrupling, quintupling, sextupling your numbers, and there's that sort of like exponential growth, there is certainly that problem of the snowball experience, that runaway, where if someone just has like a couple of good turns at the very beginning of the game, then that game is basically over. When someone has just hoarded a ton of money very early on, which can make the last turn of the game extraordinarily anticlimactic when someone has so much money, as long as they don't bet everything, it is literally mathematically impossible for them to lose the game. Um, which certainly lends itself to this feeling of like, well, should we even bother playing this last round? Like, I guess so, just for completionist's sake, to say that we played through the whole game, but the game is really over on turn 6, but whatever, I guess. Not to say that that's how every single game will ever go, but it is certainly at least what we experienced in our playing of it. Um, so, on the aesthetic sense, on the tactile experience, it's got the components are extraordinarily cheap. Which, on the one hand, it was a very cheap game, so I can't blame it. But there's like this very like kind of crappy like fold out or not fold out, roll out like piece of fabric that's like the roulette sort of table. All the poker chips are like these punch out pieces of cardboard. The poker tray is like the most flimsy piece of transparent plastic in the world. Just every single aspect of it is so incredibly, like, all the components are so cheap and flimsy, which is kind of unfortunate when any game that involves poker chips, at least half the fun is being able to go clack, 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 clack as you drop all your little plastic poker chips on top of each other, which you can't do with cardboard chips. That having been said, when it's all together, when you have the rolled out map and the trays and the chips and everyone's throwing out their chips and cards onto the table, it all comes together, and I do feel like it does succeed in capturing that kind of casino-y feel of being around like a roulette table where, people are throwing in their bids and their bets. Like, I do think it ultimately succeeds in being that sort of casino-y betting experience. I do think as a board game, as a thing, if it is the only thing you are paying attention to, it definitely leaves something to be desired, which I think, on the one hand, I think that is just a part of the gambling experience. Any game where people can have a point value where they are doubling, quadrupling, quintupling it, then it's just like inevitable that by the end of the game, it is extremely possible that someone just cannot be caught up with. Because like the alternative is that, like, well, if you make it possible for anyone to win in the last round, then you're making those first couple of rounds meaningless if they ultimately don't add anything to that last experience. But I think as like a party game to do as an activity, being distracted and having conversation, if you're in a headspace where all you are paying attention to is your own money and you're just trying to get your own score as high as possible, and you're not necessarily paying attention to whoever else has like the most money and like how much you have to bet in order to even get to an amount where like you can even conceivably tie or meet up with them, and thinking about the game from like the perspective of like, well, if I even want to have a chance of winning, I'm forced to bet on the like all guesses too high to get this times 6 payout, even though I don't even think that's the right answer. I just have to do that to even have a chance at winning. Which, kind of unfortunate. Because, like, obviously you don't have that problem with real gambling when you're just trying to get your own money as high as possible. But Yeah, so I guess yeah, maybe if you don't consider the game from the perspective of there just being a single winner, but instead of just like a rankings of like who had the most to like who had the least amount of money, I guess it would work better in that kind of way. Uh, but Wits and Wagers did enjoy it. I am a fan. I do think it. I appreciated, unlike a lot of sort of games, that same sort of variety where it'll say like numbers like name this random number of this very specific thing that we're counting, and then just to provide zero like means of how they acquire that information. I do appreciate that this game actually gave like a source at the bottom of the answer of every single card. um, so okay, yeah, that's Wits and Wagers. Yeah, pretty good. The next game we played was Side Effects. So this was a game I had never heard of before the having played it. But generally, the main premise is it is like a card matching game. Everyone has got these like mental illnesses that you are trying to cure with drugs. Uh, so and then when you like take those drugs, they have like side effects which open you up to getting more mental illnesses, which the core premise of the game. And I think the hardest thing for the game to do was sort of balance that edginess factor, which was certainly when I first like realized what was actually going on in the game. I was like, uh oh. So I have a feeling this is either going to be a thing where it's either trying so incredibly hard to be edgy that it just is like weird and uncomfortable and kind of like sad and like, oh god, like why are they like just kind of embarrassing almost. Or on the other hand, it's just so incredibly like sanitized that like the theme could have been swapped out for anything and it would have not made a difference. Um, but ultimately, I think they actually struck the balance relatively well. Like, there's no cards that are straight up like, go hang yourself in your closet. But there are cards where, someone will have suicidal tendencies or something, and then you can cause them to have to trigger an episode in that where they then end up like discarding their hand. And it's like, yeah, okay, I can see the implications there. And I there was like an element of kind of like fun of just like reading all the cards and realizing like how they decided to interpret what like a gambling addiction or like how having anorexia works in this game, and like what the implication of what that means, all these different various like parts of the game are supposed to represent. That was kind of like fun to figure out. The gameplay itself, there's this kind of like, I don't necessarily know if I want to say a problem because I feel like it was intentional, but basically the average round would go as like people, basically you win by curing yourself of all the problems by taking all the right drugs and combinations of therapy and all that stuff. And I think like, so basically like someone would get out of the round extremely quickly at the beginning when there's just tons of people to potentially target with your various like episodes and mental illnesses you can give to people. um yeah, when there's a lot of people could just like cure themselves very quickly. And so like in the first like 2-3 minutes of the game, some number of players will have just like gotten themselves out, and then there'll be like 2 to 3 players who will just go through this like almost like Sisyphean back and forth, as now they are the only people that they can target each other. So they are just like hitting each other with cards back and forth. And like you have like half the table, like 4 players, 5, 6 players just sitting there as like 2 to 3 other players just going for 20 minutes, just like trading these diseases and drugs with each other. And by trading, I mean like I'm using one card on you, you're using one card on me, I'm using one card on you, you're using one card on me. Which on the one hand, I get maybe that this sort of like attrition thing is an intentional sort of like metaphorical thematic representation of the struggles of dealing with mental health issues. And it's like, yeah, you solve one problem and then another one comes back, and then you solve one and then another one comes back. Like I think that was interesting, and like kind of a cool gimmick that they succeeded in like representing through these cards and the gameplay. But on the other hand, when I am going into a board game and I am looking for a certain experience, very, very rarely is the experience I'm looking for is a simulation of like dealing with mental health problems and the tedious nature of like just like having to go like back and forth and back and forth and back and forth of solving one problem and then having that problem come back up and then solving that problem and then having that problem come back up and then just doing that over and over and over. Especially just because like the vast majority of the game, the majority of players are not in it. They're just like knocked out. They've like knocked themselves out and are waiting for the next round to begin. So, I don't know. I think the game succeeded in what it was trying to do. I just don't know if it was particularly like a fun thing that I would want to like go out of my way to like experience more of. I don't know, but I think interesting premise. I think the like the idea of it worked for me. Just like the execution, I don't know, left something to be desired. So after that, Quiplash, not a board game, just a game of the video variety, I guess. So on the one hand, I do think Quiplash is the only good Jackbox game. And that's not even like a subjective opinion thing. There have been scientific articles about this proving that to be the case. Jackbox games, just in general, I think usually pretty poorly designed. I can't help but play them and then just afterwards think like, why in God's name did they choose for these different things to work this way? Like, even just T-shirt KO, which I think is the closest to being like the second good game. It's just like you come up with so much stuff. Like the more than half of the pictures you draw never even get seen by any of the other players, which means there's like 3 minutes at the beginning of like every single round that is just immediately getting thrown out the window. And it's just you're doing this to like potentially provide more options for someone else to choose to create a shirt from, but it just feels like why am I wasting my time? Just give me just one. I'll just draw a single picture and then they can use that for the t-shirt. Don't have me draw 3 of these just for 2 of them to get thrown out. It's just like, come on, let's use our time more efficiently. So Quiplash. Okay, on the one hand, I do get players, given, time or whatever, you can optimize the fun out of any game. But I think some games are more or less susceptible to that kind of issue. Quiplash, just like inherently, the whole point of the game is like voting for whoever came up with the funnier thing. But the actual act of voting, you literally are just getting punished for playing the game at all. Because to vote at all, you are giving your opponents more points. And if you care about winning at all and you're like, I want to prove to my friends that I'm the funniest person here by winning this game, then your incentive is just to never vote for anything at all because there's no penalty for not voting. There's only downside to voting. Which just like why would you have the game work that way at all? Just like why not? Just, when people vote for a thing, they just get 20 points or whatever when they vote. Just so that people will always vote every round just for a few extra bonus points. It's just like I feel like it can only have taken like one or two play tests of the game to have figured that out. Like how I feel like with Quiplash, how has no one just made a good, better version of this game already? Which on the one hand, I get there's a lot of aesthetic going in there that genuinely did take a lot of effort to make. Like having every single question be voice acted. That must have taken a lot of time. And to come up with all the graphics and animations, they do add a lot to the game. And I get that. And it probably would take a lot of effort to recreate that. But again, you just got to record a dude saying some sentences. Like, come on, internet. Someone make just a better version of Quiplash already. Another thing with Quiplash, the last round. The last round always makes up for the vast majority of the points of the game. Which on the one hand, that's cool, that's fine. You keep everyone invested with this like last question. Because like anyone could conceivably win if they do extremely well in the last one. But they are always the most incredibly lame thing to have ever come up with in the entirety of existence. It's just they're always the acronyms or the fill in a comic bubble or whatever. And they are always like the least funny part of the game. They are always extremely anticlimactic. It just feels bad. Like I will say, so Quiplash, it is funny. It is like, I do like it. It does get reactions out of people. I do think, yeah, like there is always this sort of, it is almost funny just to view from like a sociological, just like the psychological perspective of trying to see the trends in the movement of how people change their answers towards what gets reactions, where there's almost this inevitable like implosion of this black hole, like event horizon of like either edgy jokes and or like inside jokes just like cycling in on themselves to the point where like they get like either meta, and then you have to make fun of how meta the inside jokes are getting, or making fun of the edginess of the edgy jokes and how hard people are trying to be edgy. Which it's just like almost like fascinating to watch that process like unfold in front of you. But yeah, I like Quiplash, only good Jackbox game. Someone could just make it but better, so someone get on that. I will say, as like an activity towards the end of the night, I do think it is like a good payoff to like just everything that has been worked up for towards the end, where you can have this one almost like cathartic experience, this one almost like real show type of event where you just make jokes off of all of the inside jokes and all of the things that have occurred earlier in the night and sort of solidify them in the mythology of this night, which is cool and interesting, and I like it for that aspect that it provides. So yeah, certainly it does have value, and it is an experience. Big fan of all of that. Um, yeah, so that's Quiplash. Okay, next game. Monikers. Oh god, where did it? Right. Okay. So yeah, monikers. Good game. Very at this point, we this has become a game that we've played to death. Um, but that having been said, it is very on the one hand for this particular specific experience, having played the game with new players who have never played it before, it was quite fun to just absolutely like pop off just because we have played it like so many times. We have like memorized every single card, and just to be able to like say one card and just instantly realize, oh yeah, that's the FBI who shot himself in the leg while, or shot someone in the leg while dancing, or that's the girl who runs and jumps like a horse on, or that in Norway, or whatever. It's just like getting these extremely specific cards, just like just off the rip, off of like 1 second of a clue. Just very funny to see people's reaction to that. But I do think just if so, board games, the thing that they are trying to accomplish, there's a million types of things that you might be trying to get out of a board game. But for me, one of those things, one of the top three things that I want to get out of a game is to get reactions, responses, some emotion out of people, and to be able to like share that with the table with everyone that we're playing with. And I think from that like category, like Monikers just does an insanely good job. It certainly, like, out of like emotional reaction per minute, like Monikers has just an extremely high level for that. Like they're like the beginnings, the first two rounds always kind of like slow, but then by that last round, the amount of like laughs per card, the amount of like laughs per like charade people are partaking in, and that kind of like excitement you can feel from people they get when they are handed the deck and they get to do the charades. It is just a very infectious energy that it just it seems like no matter who you're playing with, like people just cannot help but have like a good time with playing Monikers. So it's just it's just like it's like comforting. It's almost like junk food in that manner, where it's just it seems like so easy to get such a good time and such a good response out of Monikers. So like I absolutely love it for that, and I feel like for that reason I don't think it's going to be leaving the board game rotation anytime soon. Yeah, generally just a big fan. I will say, if I had to have one thing with Monikers, one piece of advice is just to not play it for points, not to play it as a game to win, because as soon as it becomes a competition, and as soon as it becomes a thing where the enemy team has a vested interest in paying attention to slip ups, and as soon as they have something to gain from saying like nope, that's a violation, that actually you are not, it's round two, so you are not allowed to perform that is outside of the laws of what you can do, that is you, that card doesn't count, or it's like no, all right, google.com, you can clearly see here in the definition that is not a compound word, that is that you cannot use that as your da 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 da. And when those arguments start coming up, there is no faster way to drain all the fun from Monikers than with those kinds of quibbles. So I do think It is much better as just a performance activity rather than as an actual game to win. But monikers, I absolutely love it. It's just such a good time so consistently. Okay, so after monikers, we had Bean Bonanza, or just Bonanza, I believe is what it's actually called. There's a trading game. Basically, it's the one good, interesting part of Catan distilled down to, a single activity game. So this time we played it with 7 people. I still don't feel like I've played Bonanza enough times to have a truly good, full opinion of it. Generally, I do like it. I am a fan of the high octane trading sort of environment of it. I will say with 7 players, it went extraordinarily fast. I think I got maybe like 3 or 4 turns total throughout the entire game. Just because, yeah, the deck went through like so incredibly quickly. Um, which I do feel like has kind of had this little bit of a problem where, like, if you stumble at the beginning, then you're just losing just off, like, it is very easy to get in a situation very quickly where it becomes impossible to come back from. Especially, like, yeah, if someone else just has a good start, then it can almost feel like impossible to, like, catch up with them. um but I do like that sort of stock exchange auctioneering, that like the whole incentive of, like, whoever does the most trading is likely going to win, which means, like, everyone is going to try to be doing as much trading as possible. I do think the game has just succeeded in having that very strong core gameplay loop in which it, like, actually incentivizes you to make as many deals as possible as fast as possible. I do like the energy that comes out from Bonanza. And it is just, I feel like no matter how many times I play it, it's funny every time to be making these Godfather blackmail cutthroat deals regarding beans. I don't think the humor, or I think once it becomes like unfunny, that it's becoming beans, and, like, by the time it just becomes natural and, like, that sort of absurdity is lost, there's almost that, like, double level of absurdity of that getting so lost in the game itself and getting so invested into just the trading aspect of it that you don't even realize that you're talking about, like, red beans and chili beans and all these different just beans. It almost adds, like, that another level of, like, humorous absurdity once you get to that point. Um, so Bonanza, my current thought on it, my current stance is that I'm very excited to try more of it. I want to give it some more shots. I want to try just, like, making up my own rules next time, just adding my own sort of couple of variations. Like, for one, I think it would just be fun to throw all the beans in there instead of taking out certain beans, which I'm sure this game was probably play tested and they realized it is, for whatever reasons, it is unfun to get these, like, very rare beans stuck in your hand that you're going to have a very hard time building up a collection of. I guess is why they did not include those in those big 7-player games. I want to try just opening up trading to everyone on everyone's turn. Right now, as it stands, you can only trade with whoever it is its turn is, which I think, for one, like, just there's simplicity there. I feel like there's some very weird, awkward things that would probably happen if you let anyone trade with each other, especially with the whole, like, having to plant beans that you trade for. And also it gives everyone that sort of moment to be the highlight, because if you didn't do that, if anyone could just trade at anyone's turn, then just whoever is the loudest and is willing to like scream over everyone else the most will just always be doing the most trades, and like more subdued players won't get those opportunities on their turn to do their big like trades that they've been waiting multiple rounds or whatever to like pull off. Um, that being said, I think it would be fun to, if you did open up trading to everyone, to create those opportunities for just absurd mega trades where you're like, okay, so he's going to give this person these 3 beans, and they're going to give this person these 3 beans, so that you can give them 2 beans, and then they can give this person that many beans, and then it's like, okay, and everyone make your trade. I think it would be fun to like orchestrate these giant mega deals between like 5 players all at once. I think that would elevate even more of that like stock exchange crazy trades, just trying to keep a hold of like what's going on. I think the more trading you could include to just make it even harder to keep track of like the absurd networks of bean deals that are going on and all of that stuff. Which again, maybe that will ruin the game by making things too complicated. I don't know, but I do think that, I don't know. Ultimately, Bonanza, excited to try more of it. Excited to make up rules and try different variations and stuff. Okay, last game we played was Just One. Just One, basically like So Clover, except, instead of matching your own cards of words with one word, everyone is trying not to say the same one word to give a single guesser a hint to guess their word. So Just One, pretty good. I think so. It differs from So Clover in that in Just One, there's effectively like zero conversation. In fact, for the most part, everyone is silent because you are not allowed to discuss what words you're writing. That's the whole point, is that everyone is doing this in secret. And then there's one big reveal where you see if anyone doubled. There's that one big reveal, see if anyone doubled. Which I do think, I like the fact that there are these sort of built-in waves of that, like, everyone's silent and like everyone is waiting, and there's that like sort of tension building, and then there's that big reveal where everyone shows, and there's that reaction of like, oh no, we doubled, or oh my god, this is going to be a great round. And then there's like the guesser who has their eyes closed for like a minute or whatever while everyone is doing this and writing their clues and comparing. And then there's that one big moment of like catharsis when they open their eyes and then they see these clues, and then they have to like figure out and then do that big guess. So there is like a lot more of that like natural wave of that like release and tension to Just One that So Clover does not have at all. But I do think I prefer the constant engagement of So Clover, where there's never a point where your like eyes are closed and you're just sitting there and waiting. You're always either just like sitting there and being like, oh my god, as you're watching your friends utterly screw up your Clover pattern, or you're sitting there and talking and arguing with your friends about what you think someone else is thinking. Because So Clover does also have those reveals where like you flip over your Clover and you see the absurd words that your friends had come up with, and then also those reveals of finding out what you got right and wrong. So ultimately, yeah, I like, now that I got So Clover, I can't imagine going back to Just One. I guess Just One does work with 7 people. So Clover's only got 6, and I think you could probably even do Just One with like 8 people, if you just give someone else the card just to hold, and You could probably scale that one up. I guess you could probably scale So Clover up too, but that would become a very obtuse and obnoxious process if you didn't actually have the little plastic clovers for the cards to fit into. Which actually, going back to Wits and Wagers, for I think its functionality as a party game, I think this game particularly lends itself quite well to the teaming up sort of idea of, you could have two people on one team because everyone's getting these two chips. So it'd be very, very easy to split those up and be like, hey, so yeah, I'll guess with one chip, you guess with the other chip. So yeah, that's just Wits and Wagers. You could have this with a ton of people could play that. Yeah, just one very good game. But now that So Clover exists, I can play that. It's just, I don't know. I can't help but feel like this is just, Daniel and the cooler Daniel. Which is funny because the one piece of feedback I'd gotten from people comparing So Clover to Just One, it was someone telling me that they thought that Just One was better. Which I do get. I can understand that it does have that natural built-in almost actual like pacing of a game, which there certainly is something to be said for. Okay, so that was all the board games we had played, which honestly, very, very, I think we were there for like 7 hours, from like 5 to like midnight or something. Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games in, which that's a pretty good rate, I think, honestly. Which also, I don't feel like it ever felt like, I think constantly changing the games does give itself that I don't know, I never felt over the course of the night like, oh god, this is just too many board games. Like I do think the constant changing of the games worked pretty well. Throwing in that Quiplash in there, I think, was a nice change of pace from the spamming of the board games. But I do think it kind of gives me hope that the OG Sublime board game night has potential to work. So I did also, a quick in defense of the pod system. I got the one piece of feedback that I did get from the friend that had had some comments to give regarding the Sublime Board Game Night video, was that they were not particularly a big fan of the idea of the pod system, which I can see how, from that perspective, from the point of view of a board game party trying to emulate a party, how that seems not like ideal. So okay, I think I probably should have explained perhaps my philosophy behind the pod system back in that other video as well. Which okay, so looking at this from the perspective of like board game party as party, the argument basically was that, like, in a regular party, you can move freely between various groups however you so wish, and that like freedom is the desirable part of a party, is that you can interact with whichever group of people at any time, whenever you want. Which I can certainly see the appeal there. And I think I probably should have specified in that pod section of that being a personal, subjective choice in, like, party preference. Because personally, when it comes to the meandering, mingling, wandering of, like, room to room or group to group of party, I can't, like, personally, in my experience, that like leads to these moments of like, walking up to people, inserting yourself into the conversation, and then realizing that this conversation is either going in a direction about a topic or a thing that you just like don't care about, and then you have to like look for an escape plan, and that's just a whole experience that I would like rather avoid. The other thing, the other direction you can go in with the party is the big group conversation when you got like that circle of like 10 plus people, which I will just admit that I am not well suited to those environments, because like I just feel like I've never gotten anything productive. I feel like I've never walked away glad that I was a part of like that big circle conversation. Um, Maybe partly because I don't want to, I'm just not the type to be like, all right, everyone here, all 10 of you guys need to hear this thing that I am about to contribute and add to this conversation. So I just like lean on the side of like being silent in those situations, which is either like listening to one person tell a story, and or if there is like a sort of back and forth crosstalk situation going around, I do feel like it is its natural tendency of those groups to do the cell mitosis and split into smaller groups where that crosstalk is no longer now like side talk and is just becoming its own main conversation that you can engage and interact with. Um, but when it comes to parties, my favorite moment, my favorite situation in any or all of them is always the forming a new group to start a new thing. I always like the, hey, we're going outside to like smoke or whatever, and then you can sit out there with like three other people, and there's not going to be people coming in and leaving, and you're not going to have to re-explain the conversation and all of that. And you get like just a solid 20-30 minutes where you can get deep into like an intimate conversation with this like small group of people. And like it always just I like that sort of feeling of, within the context of this greater party, where we all have that reason to like interact with each other, but to have this like small specific thing that might make us almost feel kind of unique within this greater situation, and to like walk back into this party after having had this conversation. I always feel like we feel a little bit closer after that situation every single time it comes up. It's just like a little bit of like a mini bonding experience to be able to have that. At least I feel. And so the pods are basically just a built-in excuse to the party to have these situations just come up. You don't have to wait and rely and try to capitalize on these experiences as they organically show up. You can just have them happen, have a reason for them to happen, and just have a reason to get into these small little intimate groups within this bigger group context, and to share a unique little bonded moment with all of them that you can then re-enter the party with, having grown a little bit closer, because that this is a thing that only we had just experienced. Um, uh, I don't know. I like that feeling, and that's my favorite experience at any party. And I think the pods, yeah, let you have that happen. So that's my in defense of pods, and I get that, some people, not so much as a fan of that. Some people are that person who, in a 10-person group, have no problem with being like, all right, everyone, like, I got a thing that I can say that'll get everyone to listen to me, which, and again, I in those few rare moments where I have been that person, I can see the appeal and how that feels good to have a bunch of people just having listened to the thing and to have just proven to yourself that you've got the capability to capture all these people attention. I can certainly see why you would want that. But anyway, all right. So yeah, Ham Board Game League Convention 2024 Day 1, first annual. Pretty good experience, I would say. Ultimately, 2 thumbs up. Big fan. All right, so with that, I will catch you guys later.